Ms. Megan Villar. This is our last session of the day before happy hours. There's many of them, so I hope you attend one of those too. But really just grateful that you all are here as part of Denver Startup Week, specifically this session. We're very excited to see over the last 13 years where this event has gone, how it's grown, how it's matured, and just the innovation that comes out of this. I hope you get some networking in and learn a lot from these leaders up here. So very happy to introduce, this is our session on robotics and scaling hardware. We have 4 wonderful speakers up here: Nicholas Carell, Billy Odman, Matanya Horowitz, and Eric Adamson. So take it away.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for coming. I'm Nicholas Carell. I'm a professor in robotics at University of Colorado and recovering robotics scaler. Well, we never scaled, and it's quite exciting to actually have a robotics panel where the topic is scaling. That is really new. The last 20 years, you would have topics about robotics, and that's the new thing, and there's maybe a future. And now we actually have 3 companies here who all have a problem that they have too many customers and need to scale. And so what we're going to do is I prepared a couple of questions so we can learn from these guys what their experiences are. And then we can also take questions from the audience to the panelists and then see what we learned today. Billy, do you want to start and explain what you're working on?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. My name is Billy Odman. I'm leading commercialization at Scythe Robotics. At Scythe, we are developing the technology to more sustainably and productively cultivate outdoor spaces. So we're making autonomous mowers to start. The forefront of green space management is commercial landscaping, and that's what we're focused on. So oftentimes when we say we're building autonomous mowers, people think of the Roombas for your lawn, but our mower eats those things for breakfast. It's a 52-inch, 1,400-pound machine that cultivates or mows the type of space you see outside this window right here. We don't take care of this park, but we could, and our machine could probably mow straighter lines than you see out there. So yeah, we're based up in Longmont. Our production facility and headquarters are in Longmont. Been around for about 6 years. The first 3 years were in research and development. Then we launched the brand 3 years ago when I joined the team, and now I'm leading all of our brand and customer work.
Awesome. Is this on? Thank you. I'm Matanya Horowitz, so I'm the founder and CEO at AMP. We make robotic systems for the recycling industry. So we have over 350 robots deployed in recycling facilities, pulling out aluminum cans, cardboard, nasty rotting food, kind of you name it, anything that goes in the garbage bin. We've been around for 10 years, have robots on 3 continents, and more recently we've been focused on not just building robots, but actually entire recycling facilities built from the ground up around artificial intelligence. And what's really exciting is those facilities can sort directly through the garbage. So think you don't have to separate your recycling, the robots take care of it for you. It ends up that is really important for the incentives of the waste industry. Something that's not well known is recycling rates have been stagnant for about 15 years, and over the last couple of years they've started going down. So despite all the good work I'm sure everybody is doing, or everybody in this room is doing, it's not really working, and it's a real shame because recycling actually has a tremendously beneficial environmental impact. So we're working to reverse that.
My name's Eric Adamson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tortuga AgTech. We've built and deployed 150-odd robots to harvest strawberries, and now 6 robots to harvest table grapes. Many people don't know, but most of the things in the produce section in your supermarket were touched by a human at least once. Extremely labor-intensive, very difficult jobs, and very wasteful supply chains. So by attempting to put automation at the center of the farm operation, which is really centered around the harvest process and human beings doing things to the plants, put a robot in there, get a bunch of data, do a job that really needs to be done, and enable people to skill up instead of having to do the worst, what people call dull, dirty, or dangerous job. I'm sure you use that as well in recycling and in mowing. And try to make the whole industry sort of more sustainable, better quality, more reliable, less dependence on a really difficult job being done by migrant labor. So that's what we do, and we're deployed in 2 continents. and 3 farms. So these farms are actually massive, and we've only basically scratched the tiny surface of what they need to be done.
Well, cool. Thank you. I think Scythe is the youngest company, no?
Yeah.
And Jack, your founder, founded another company before, Occipital Vision.
Yeah.
He sold, or it's actually the 3rd company.
No, that was his second.
And this is the 3rd, the Scythe.
Yeah. No, that was his first. This is
Yeah,
his second.
okay. So you are like one in the run of 10 years plus, both of you?
8 for us.
Okay. And I was wondering, can you maybe describe what the biggest challenges were in terms of market adaptation, like finding customers for robots? And then how that is different from selling something else like cookies or software or, and I don't know, maybe you all have opinions and we don't have to go by this order and Q&A, but I thought we can have a discussion. Maybe you can share some of your thoughts with the audience or experiences.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I've got the working mic. So, yeah, I think for us in agriculture, if you talk to most farmers in specialty, which is like anything that's not your broadacre cereals and sort of waving fields of wheat and corn, they'll say labor is the #1 issue. They don't have enough people. They can't find them. The people that they get are hard to manage. It's a really difficult job. So for us, it was quite easy to find customers. It was even quite easy to sign up customers and choose the customers we wanted to sign up with and focus on. I think over the 8-year journey, the difficult thing has been to solve the problem with like basically a moving bar, right? So the bar gets higher, right? They want it to work, but then they want it to work better and better and better, and the KPIs get more and more deep. And I think this is maybe particular to farming, but I've heard about it as well in warehouse robotics and other robotics applications, is people think what they want is this, but when you get into it, there's actually a lot of requirements for a robot, and there's a lot of edge cases that you must manage that human beings manage quite naturally. And so it makes your technology bar really high. So I'd say that the customer sort of discovery is easy. Even the customer initial sale is easy, but the getting ready to scale is really the meat of the journey, and that's a combination of the technology capability and the operation system it has to fit into, and whether that meets the customer's operational and economic requirements. So that's for us how our experience has been.
Ours is really similar. To build on that, I would say our customers have sci-fi expectations and bootstrap budgets. So like it might sound cliche, but like our customers hear robots and they think C-3PO and WALL-E, and that's the level of intelligence they assume the products have. They haven't met dumb robots yet. We don't have as smart of machines as we need to have that can't handle the situational awareness in a field where a woman lets her dog off the park to play fetch and the mower is running. A human would catch that quickly. A robot will still see it, but that's an edge case or a barrier we have to try and plan around or work around. And customers don't understand or don't want to adapt their workflow to fit in those variations, to fit in those edge cases. They want it to respond like a robot of their understanding would respond, but they don't really. There's a harsh expectation setting once the robot's actually deployed. And then with that, especially in our industries, the industries you're looking at, the budgets for this are incredibly low because we're trying to help augment labor, and this labor is oftentimes making minimum wage, maybe slightly higher, depending on the markets that you're in. It's among the lowest paying jobs. So they need to be able to price jobs using machines that cost the same amount as that labor, which at an early stage in development is unrealistic. And so that's a really big challenge to bridge and get to a point of productivity with the machine that you can add that level of value.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that, and specifically this idea that customers aren't necessarily ready for the maintenance requirements of these types of systems or kind of integrating it into their process. We've definitely kind of struggled with those issues where you can kind of pencil like, look, if you need to spend a little bit more time taking care of the robot, it really pencils out because in our case, the robot does the work of 2 or 3 people. Turnover is extremely high in recycling. These jobs it basically consists of people standing around by conveyor belts, sorting stuff by hand, and it's just miserable. It smells bad and it's dangerous and all of these things. Nonetheless, even slight changes to a customer's operation ends up being pretty hard to get them over. And so a lot of our deployments were really kind of with best of class operators who kind of would do that math and understand just how important it would be for their business to adapt to the new technology and gain an edge. I would just add on top of that, another sort of difficult issue with growing the company and getting to that next stage has been kind of really understanding the incentives of the industry. So you think when we first came in, we made these robots that could be easily retrofitted into recycling facilities, automate their manual sorting. It seems pretty straightforward. We save them costs and we help them recover more material. What you end up learning is recycling facilities, they don't actually get the revenue from the materials they sort out. A lot of that material revenue is actually rebated back to the municipality. So like City of Boulder, City of Denver, the people who are supplying a lot of material. There's some historical reasons for this around them trying not to have commodity risk at the recycling facility because they're selling commodities and they fluctuate. But the consequence is you learn the recycling facility, if it underperforms, it doesn't actually hurt the operator. The city is the one who's missing out on the aluminum cans that they might miss if they're operating poorly or if they're not fully staffed. And so you have this principal agent problem where if they don't man a location and they lose $100,000 a year of aluminum cans, City of Denver loses, not the way, necessarily the waste company. And so here you have a core incentive issue that really changes how customers will think about automation and efficiency improvements and yield improvements and purity improvements. And sort of discovering these things around the market structure has been hard, and you can really make some bad product bets if you don't understand the sort of deeper levels of what customers are after.
One thing we're dealing with right now as we've got more robots in the field than ever is exactly that incentive alignment. Conceptually, robots to help augment labor sounds great. Landscape contractors and business owners are bought in. It's easy for us to get the customers on board, but it's the change in operation that is the more difficult part. And on a mow crew, oftentimes mowing is like the most prestigious job. It's kind of the crew lead or like the most senior role, and you have a robot coming in to take that. That's a really big misalignment. You have somebody who wants to sit on the machine and mow mindlessly. It's mundane, it's hot, but it's also like of the easiest jobs on the site. So how do you align those incentives? How do you reposition the robot wrangler role as the premium job on the site, or figure out how to get those incentives aligned, because that is what drives adoption?
I'll add really quickly, this is fascinating because we're in very different industries, but the dynamics are very similar. We have a similar problem on farm where the owner wants us to succeed and the day-to-day manager is like, get out of my way, I have a job to do. I get why you're here, but like today I have to do this job. And I bring it back to Nicholas's original questions, like how is this different from cookies or software? A cookie or anything consumer, let's say, is like, it's a little bit fuzzier whether it's good enough or not. And it can be like pleasing in a way that isn't only economic or operational. So there's all this flexibility around branding, and there's all kinds of nuance I don't understand about those businesses. But I think you can take off a little sooner. You can kind of get going, right? But in an industry like with robotics, it's more like selling extremely complex enterprise-level software, because then you have multiple users and multiple incentives and all these different things that are playing in, and the sale is longer. But maybe your unit of scale is only one unit sale. So it's like a complex sale, but you don't get $200,000, $300,000 of enterprise revenue from converting like a mid-sized business to Oracle or whatever. So I think the reason why we're all up here, it's been fairly, this is difficult, and it is. But the opportunity is huge, right? There's so much need, and the technology is finally there where we can start wrestling with these big problems, but the problems are big. And there's a lot of challenge to scale up in robotics because of how complex it gets once you take this brand new tech and put it in a system that not only has misaligned incentives, but then the actual job is hard, and doing the job well is hard, and so on. So there's a lot of layers to this. Just to say, like, buyer beware. If you want to get into this, there's a lot to try to crack in order to solve a big problem.
And Eric, you also come from business. No, you were at McKinsey or BCG before you, and then you joined up with technologists to start the company. based on the business need and not the other way around, that I start companies, which is I have really cool technology that I'm excited about. And one example, I got money from NASA to pick strawberries in space, like an ISS. And then we learned pretty quickly that this is the only thing the astronauts actually want to do themselves. I mean, this is really a really high point if something like this happens and they can harvest this. And so it's a really silly idea to try to automate this. And we still did a lot of manipulation research, but it's interesting how you then have to learn the domain that you come in. I mean, I come in arrogantly and say, I want to build this robot, and then I have to learn, farmers or what work crews do, and you trash. And now my question is really,
Well, actually, Nicholas, I think that's it's an interesting point because, what we're not really saying up here is that the technology was the roadblock. Like, at least maybe it was different in your guys' situations, but for us, the technology got beyond human levels of performance and kind of met the sort of, I forget what I'm looking for, but the value prop that we're looking for really early on, and most of the issues then became sort of commercial issues, incentive issues, everything like that. But, deep learning and robotics to solve our problem, at least, we basically had figured out more or less in 2018, 2019.
But the question now for you, three of you, is how do you guys how much of you became a fully vertical integration, where you, in your case, you sell lawn mowing services versus partnering with gardeners who want your machine to make more money? And in your case, like you mentioned it already, you started selling the robots to recycling plants, and now you build your own recycling plants, because that's the only way to really master all of this. And you have no strawberry farm yet, I guess, but I wanted to see, should we start companies that build robots and sell them, or should we start companies that do X and do a better job at X because we can build robots?
I'll speak for us, which was, we focused on augmenting existing recycling facilities, then started making our own. And what we found was when you sort of control the whole system, there were compounding effects on the technology. Like, you could be like 2x better than a person at the component level, but then like 10x better at the system level. Then what we found was selling our concepts into the industry was difficult for a lot of kind of enterprise salesy reasons. It would require process change. People had to understand the new tech. We'd be selling jet engines essentially to guys who are used to getting propeller engines, right? And so they have to really think about how they do business and how they maintain. So we ended up coming up with a sort of fully integrated model where we sell these guys the facility, but then we operate it on their behalf, and we get 7 or 10 or even 20-year contracts for that. Now we can provide sort of performance guarantees for the system as a whole. We totally sidestep issues with, is the customer going to maintain the thing? We're going to maintain the thing. That ends up being really complicated in its own right, but we're able to internalize a lot of the competitive edge of the robotic systems. I've heard about a lot of other robotics companies going the same direction. Like, I forget the name of the startup, but there's one where they're making robots to help fish farms, which I know nothing about. And then, and then they were like, we're just going to make the fish farm. I think a big part of the question is how competitive the industry is. If it's not that competitive and people don't actually have to improve their operations and they can still be successful without improvement, then it's hard to sell incremental improvements into it. I think that's part of it, and that's part of our situation. But then it's also, just how much of a technological leap I think folks have to make. That's an obvious variable there. But I've definitely found for us, getting all the sort of dumb questions around how much someone's going to maintain something, or can they even understand the tech, like just getting all those questions to the side has been really great.
I think an additional variable is the scope of which your solution handles in the operation. So, for example, mowing is one small portion of a landscape operation. You've got the edging and trimming and the detail work and the irrigation and the coloring, and there's a whole slew of services offered by landscape contractors that we as robotic lawnmower manufacturers have no desire or ability to do well. So us creating a landscape landscape company that uses scythe mowers would also require us to expand our scope and our expertise across a wide range of services that we don't have and that we don't really want to do, and that it will take a long time to build robots to do. So I think that level of control over the environment depends on how much of that environment you're servicing as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And the other point is that if there is a system you can build, like you guys aren't, a landscaping business is a services business. You're talking about a facility that is also kind of a services that you provide, but it's a facility. For us to be fully integrated, we actually founded thinking, oh, we'll be a farm with a robot in the middle of it, because if you have the robot, like the whole farm should change. And that is very academically true. But in reality, farming is really hard. And there are people who do it at a scale that we could never imagine and don't have the capital to do. But if we had the capital, we might have tried it already. Like, we've been kicking that around for years, and we would have been able to operate the farm around the robot much more effectively in the way that you described, Matanya. And I'll brag for you, because you won't do it yourself, but one element that AMP has done extraordinarily well, aside from the technology and all the scale-ups issues they've tackled, is the fundraising. It requires a huge amount of capital to vertically integrate. And we have raised more than anyone else in our space, but nowhere near enough to build our own farm and operate it at a scale that would matter to vertically integrate. We have kicked it around, but that was also much more possible in the heady days of 2021, when people were spacking for hundreds of millions of dollars and doing all kinds of crazy things. So there's also this element, and I'm sure we're going to go there, but to capitalize a scale-up in robotics is harder than to capitalize a scale-up in certain other types of venture-type businesses, in software or other things. So for us in particular, like, we would maybe have tried, but we couldn't possibly have afforded it.
Yeah, I think that actually brings up an interesting point I haven't really thought about with respect to the business, but it's obvious. Part of the reason we were able to sort of take on the whole facility is our facility projects are basically underwritten by 7 to 10 year contracts. Recycling and waste management are essentially utilities. And so those long-term cash flows let us basically take that leap, raise the funding and everything like that. And I would imagine agriculture, nobody's got a 10-year contract. Probably the same, right? You don't get it, or maybe people get maybe 3 years. Yeah. So the business model match probably, or the commercial models that are out there probably determine a lot of just how vertical you can go.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, for bringing up the scaling issue and the hardware and funding that is required. But without talking too much about money and how difficult it is to fundraise, and because that changes, we can't control when Meta doesn't do well, then you don't get money. That's not really correlated. But the question I have for all of you is, how do you see robotics as a stepwise scaling process? Because you have a certain number of robots you can make for a certain amount of money, and then when you get to the next level, you build your own facility or you contract a new partner in China or something, and then you have to sell 10,000, but you can't sell more, and then you have to go 50,000. Is that something? How has that been now that you have been scaling, all of you?
One of the things I would highlight is there are supply chain issues and questions. Those become very different. Like, you can sort of slap something together at a certain scale, but then you really need a real supply chain at another scale. And depending on how big the thing, you do have those breakpoints. For us, I would say there was kind of like 10 and under, or there was 1 or 2, then there was 10 and under. Then there was sort of what we built to go from 10 to 300. Like, all of that was pretty consistent. And then there was the scale after that. But just as significant for us was, in startup world, right, you sort of want to start off with doing things that don't scale and just shipping and getting stuff out there so you can learn. And the maintainability and how much specialized knowledge you need from the team ends up being a real constraint. Like, for our initial systems, each one was totally different, especially custom projects. It was no problem at all. We serviced them. I flew out, pulled all-nighters at facilities, kind of like fixing these robots. And when that sort of lasts for a while, but then you can't have like 10 people, all of which are the master of one robot. And so that maintainability and what happens in the field after you get the thing working in the field, I think is really important. And it was surprising the extent to which good product decisions and velocity just absolutely take a back seat to questions about interoperability and sort of the knowledge base you need for your service team. Like that becomes like just the absolutely dominant variable, and yeah, it just limits how much you can move. Yeah.
I can describe how we were successful going from tech phase where you ship as fast as possible, broken, learn, do it again, iterate. And we did that. Our technology problem was not solved as quickly as yours. I think we're probably in some ways still solving that problem. But we basically iterated on one robot, 4 times in 2 years. So hardware up, everything. Rewrote all the code, rewrote even all the firmware, rewrote everything 4 times, 2 years, to try to get the form factor right on the hardware and how the software interacts with that. And then that cycle started slowing a little, but still, like once a year, we were basically turning a whole new robot. And so you go from like pure tech experimentation and learning to, all right, are we starting to figure out how this is going to fit operationally into the customer's problem and solve a problem economically, right? Is it actually working? You're thinking about that the whole time, but you're really starting to see, like, is it fitting or not? And quickly try to bootstrap yourself to 5. If you have 5 robots or 15 robots, which we would have to have in one site, right, to see a crew picking. We had 15 robots picking, and then for us, our customer is like, oh, I see it working. I see 15 of them. They're all working. I can now imagine what 100 would look like. Chicken and egg. Okay, now we've got that sort of proved. Now let's bootstrap that to a fundraise to build 150, which we did. We built 150. It took us like 3 years to really dial in what 150 robots in the field looks like and how to operate a crew of 25 every day. And I would only really say out of an 8-year journey in the last 12 months where we really starting to crack that problem, where we're like, okay, we're actually in the customer's operation every single day, even longer than the humans are picking, maybe sometimes 6 days, 7 days a week, and we're operating that service. So you're bootstrapping yourself from like tech to tech plus to small business solution at a pilot scale to an economic scale pilot to a fleet scale pilot, and it's turtles all the way down, right? The next one for us would be a customer scale pilot and then a region scale pilot. Like we'd have to continue proving this model, and that's what we're kind of fundraising for right now. It's like, how do we get to that next big jump? So I think your original question was, tell us about the stages, and it's not a smooth line. You're not talking about monthly revenue growth. You're not talking about, user growth month over month. You're like, we're at this stage, how do we leap to this stage? How do we then raise enough money and hire their team to leap to this stage? Okay, now we've proven this stage, what's the next big jump? So it's very much like a stepwise progress rather than a smooth grow.
You can break the company every time.
And you can break the company every time, and honestly, every time you kind of, I don't know how it's been for you guys, but for us, every time you have to resolve a lot of the problems you thought you had solved in the initial stage.
Yeah, again, very different industries, but same problems. I think at Scythe, we have more or less tied the generations of our machines and the size of them to our fundraises, so just getting bigger and bigger each time, and you have to balance what number of units will excite investors for the next round of funding with what number of units can we execute well in the field, and how many do we build? So how many units do we build? What's that going to cost to build them? And then how do we support it on the other side to be successful, so that equation looks really good for a fundraise that follows to get you to that next level. In addition to those pieces, we've kind of jumped every year with a new machine and new scale. At Scythe, we also have a seasonality to the business that I would imagine affects you all as well, but with grass growing, typically only 8 months a year in most of the markets that we're in, that creates a natural opportunity to introduce a new machine or introduce a new fleet of machines, but that also has additional costs as we look to scaling what was prototype to pre-production, now to our mass production unit. How do we build more of those to service as many customers as we can?
Well, thanks. I have a couple more questions before we get the audience questions. I hope that covers also your interests. And the first one of the now more technical questions is, how has generative AI affected you as a business? I mean, did it come at a time where you would have done things differently, or does it affect you in any way? Did you change the way your product looks like since we have ChatGPT and vision language models and things like that?
Yeah, as someone who started out coding the code base and now just writes emails, like it's, yeah, you guys sympathize. So we're using the generative sort of coding tools internally, and they are incredibly powerful. Like the entire arc of the company would have been different if those tools had been there, but in a way that I think isn't AMP specific. It's more just technology company specific, but you know, it's remarkable for me to think about like what would it have looked like with half the team size or a quarter of the team size and actually been more productive. I really think that's possible now for folks doing this from scratch. But at this point, we don't. We use some generative techniques to augment our data set, but like fundamentally, we are using what is now. You know, it's unbelievable to me, but like now the vintage AI, which is you know, sort of deep learning stuff. And that's the core technology that enables what we're doing and is at its core generative, but the same benefits for other businesses benefit us.
Yeah, we have a hot take that we went public with on this in a blog post. I think generative, we do use, before I go into my rant, we do use some components of generative AI, mostly in the pipeline, kind of in a similar way you're describing, where we can kind of quality control or quality check some of the images or the model performance using certain subsets of a generative AI tool set. But the kind of like black box, Waymo, you know, pump a bunch of AVs into San Francisco, collect a huge amount of data, find all the edge cases and turn the crank every week, it requires a lot of people and a lot of capital. And they're making it work seemingly. I don't know very much detail, but in our application, we went a different way, and we wrote a post about it. It's essentially like there's a concept of creativity from AI and solving problems that is really exciting, but it's very far away from solving like a very particular problem a million times a day, and doing it at a level that is industrially required. And for that problem, which is a little more constrained, we've decided we're going to break up that problem into multiple subcomponents and hone using vintage AI solutions to those problems, the subcomponent problems, in a way that is much more tunable. We have a lot of variability in our season. We have a lot of variability day to day. Fruits can change size, shape, positioning day to day because of weather, because of anything. So if we can break this, like how do you move through a farm and pick strawberries into, 20 component problems and focus on those problems in very particular ways, we can actually do the job at a higher rate of accuracy, cheaper, with a lighter weight set of models, easier to train, tune, diagnose, and iterate on than kind of this like mega approach. Now, I think we'll get beaten once we have AGI level intelligence that can do what a human can do. But in that circumstance, we all have a lot more exciting problems and opportunities to think about. So we've decided to not lean too heavily into generative AI, other than certain components of the stack that are quite useful in very targeted ways.
Same at Zyth. I'm non-technical. There's some alumni here that could answer that question better, but I will say another critical piece for us is safety. We have a 1,400-pound machine with 3 blades that are each spinning at 4,000 RPM, so we need to have high confidence in the output of the machine, and just the reliability and stability of a lot of generative AI models today aren't to the confidence level we need. So that is kind of driving some of our philosophy as well.
Yeah, great. I wanted to make fun of you guys and say you're the dinosaurs and you haven't, the new guys will do it. But I think that's a great point, Billy. I also wonder, like military applications and industrial applications, whether you don't need classical AI and symbolic planning to actually meet the performance and robustness requirements of these enterprises. And then these things are more like a toy because you can't trust them, and ChatGPT is random. But another technology that we see a lot about right now are humanoid robots. And I was wondering how that prospect now, there are 30 companies in China that make them. Like for 100K you can get them. The next one is coming out for 30K, they claim. And Elon Musk always said 20K for his Optimus robot. So I wanted to ask very specifically, do you think that the humanoids would have less adoption problems in your industries because they would actually fit directly into the existing workflows that have been occupied by people?
Yeah, I'll be hot take guy again. I think humanoids are a massive hype bubble. Most people I've talked to that understand the warehouse application alone think, why not just put it on wheels? It might be partially humanoid. Maybe it's got a couple arms and some sensor suite that looks kind of like a face, but the legs are completely unnecessary and actually limiting and also unsafe and probably not safety certifiable. In an environment where a humanoid has to interact with actual humans, it seems prohibitive. That's my take, and therefore I think the application in other environments is a little bit farther fetched. Consumer environments, sure, but the last thing I'll say on this is we are all very specifically targeted robotics companies. I don't believe that platform technology in robotics is a great way to solve real problems, because the last inch of that robotics problem is where 95% of the hard work is. And so there's a lot of companies either trying to do an application layer which helps a robot operate, or a hardware layer, or a platform itself. Hey, take my thing and you do something cool with it. It's going to be great. Give me $100,000. They're going to sell a lot of them to academic or pilot style applications, but I don't think that's a recipe for scaling robotic technology at a societal level, because the last inch is 95% of the hard work and 99% of the edge cases and everything else. That's my hot take.
I guess I actually have a pretty similar take. In our domain, we built a bunch of different systems, but most of our systems now rely on little air jets, so little air puffs to sort pieces of material. And so our robots will do the work of 2 or 3 people. Our jets will do the work of more like, depending on how you count it, like 20 or 40 people per robot. So, if you can make a device that's beating a person, it'll probably beat the humanoid. That being said, I'm a little bit more bullish on it, but in applications where you have some champion that's really well aligned. And so, when I think about a lot of these humanoid companies, I'm like, man, you've got all the problems I have selling into the industry, plus safety and navigation issues and all this stuff. Maybe you can overcome that, and it's exciting because maybe there's so many applications, but I'd hate to be competing against Tesla in this, where it's like Tesla can make the choice, right? They're their own customer, they internalize it. Like, all the issues of scaling up a robotics company, I think, are really just super compounded. And if you have a captive customer like Amazon or Tesla, then you have like a lot of the commercial issues set aside in a way that's really important for something that's that difficult. So I don't know, could be wrong about that though.
Yeah, I'm aligned as well. The only thing I'll add is I think the obsession with humanoids is more reflective of the human self-obsession and wanting to create something like us because we think it's the best thing to do, when there's actually other solutions we can build that could do it better.
Thanks for that. So my last question that I prepared is, and this is maybe difficult because you are still very excited about your work and your startups, but maybe we can frame it like, what do you think is the opportunity right now that you want to share with the audience, if you see any hungry faces here who want to start companies, or what I can share with my students, what they should work toward in the next year, in the next 2 years?
Yeah, I'll say, something that's interesting is robotics businesses tend to be really capital intensive. So that scares a lot of folks away. You need to raise even more money for the hardware, and you have hardware issues and software issues and customer issues and things like that. In a lot of sort of industrial applications or utility-like applications, once you're embedded, you're very hard to unseat. And so it ends up being you end up creating very durable businesses if you can kind of get over a lot of these challenges. And so the prize can be large. Something I didn't appreciate initially also was, once you kind of you show the customers adopting, and once you have real scale, there is a lot of capital that's looking for applications like this that is much more sort of debt focused. So there's a lot of money looking to get deployed into something that might have a 7 to 15% interest rate. And if you show up and say, I want to deploy 1,000 robots, I have steady cash flows from those robots, you can get a lot of debt against projects like that. And so the capital intensity of the business doesn't need to slow you down after you get past a certain stage. And so when you combine those things and you say, okay, I can raise tons of money for the right types of projects, and once I'm in, I'm kind of stuck because I have this technical superiority. These businesses really have some extreme benefits that aren't present in kind of more like SaaS type businesses. In terms of things I'm excited about, though, if I wasn't working on this, I think generative techniques for a lot of consumer-facing stuff in sort of media is incredibly exciting, and I think there's a lot of overlaps in how you develop for those things. And so, although maybe not bullish on generative AI, unless some of these, I forget what they're called, but sort of the robot world models, if those start working really well, maybe some cool stuff comes out of that. But generative AI as sort of like another branch of really interesting software development, I think is, I think the hype is pretty real there. So.
I'd say advice or what the opportunity is the robot isn't the end, it's a means to an end. So thinking about building your hub and then what are your spokes. So for us, the mower itself that's mowing and collecting data and performing in the field has an incredible amount of kind of fit and stickiness within the operation. And our most successful next product likely won't be another hardware product, but it could be a software platform that helps landscape crews optimize their workflow around the robot, or helps landscape businesses optimize their structure and optimize their kind of master route planning business based off of where the robots are and the data the robot's collecting in the field. Then we build more robots to do more jobs across that job site, and that software platform becomes even more valuable. There's some other adjacencies and other spokes that can come off of that hub, but really the robot is one central piece, and if that's the end, your opportunity is finished. But if you look at that as the means to the end, there's a whole bunch of other technical solutions that you can build in that space.
Yeah, I would add, I guess it depends on what you're looking for. If you're a deep roboticist or interested in the forefront of generative AI or other techniques, now's probably a really exciting time to be on a project of just trying to go from 0 to 1, because it's probably easier than it's ever been before. It's still hard to do in robotics, but you can experiment really well. On the other side of the spectrum for me, what's interesting to me is trying to crack that problem of getting to a societal scale deployment, a industry-wide scale deployment of automation and robotics. Automation's already there, but autonomous robotics, robots that make decisions that are more complicated than just a sort of a typical autonomous, automation, line that we've had for decades. So like the business and operations and technological problems that we're trying to solve to scale businesses in robotics from where we are today to like industry scale, those are really interesting problems. From a technological point of view, they could be interesting as well. But if you love just building stuff, yeah, it's a great time to try to build something from scratch. It's very hard to get from there to the next step.
Well, thanks. I would like, if you have questions, yes, thank you. I will bring the mic around, I think.
Thank you. I got 2 questions I'd love to hear y'all's input on. First, how did you handle, especially in being a Colorado-based company, how did you handle deployment and then after deployment service and support? That's really, like, if you're selling the outcome, that's the biggest. And then the second, what are your thoughts on RAS?
Sorry, what's the second question?
Robot as a Service.
Being in Colorado actually ended up being great just because DIA is kind of like it really is amazing how much like a transfer and turning a 6-hour or 3-hour flights to 6-hour flights really changes your entire posture on service if you have to get people physically out there. So I would say, if anything, it was sort of net good. We really had a focus from the beginning on giving customers lots of spare parts and trying to get them to do most of the maintenance, and having a high level of introspection for the robots so we could diagnose issues remotely. But we regularly just get people on planes flying all over the country, and no disadvantage for Colorado there. And we had a robot as a service model, absolutely. We've had a lot of success with it, actually. So just basically pricing it effectively monthly through a lease. So technically it was just a lease, but then we had different service offerings on top of that that really made it pretty comprehensive, and they saw a monthly price that was competitive with or lower than their labor costs.
Yeah, I'd echo on the Colorado servicing thing. We did have field teams. So we would install teams and hire local people where our farms were. Our farm customers, have $2 to $10 million of potential ARR for us if we can do all that work. So it makes sense to try to install your own teams. But it is, it's easier from Denver with a single flight for sure. And recruiting in Denver is great. That's a different question. But yeah, you have to service, and we had to get on the plane all the time. And the second question was RAS. So for us in ag, robotics as a service is great for the customer sale, because they're like, oh, you're not going to charge me until I do the job, or until you do the job. Like, great, I will take as many as you can get, as long as they're doing the job to the KPIs that I need. So very, very beneficial on the sort of sale and customer relationship side. More challenging on the financing side, because we have to raise money, whether it's debt or equity, build robots, even sometimes build the team to build the robots, then build the robots, then get them out there, then start operating them, and then we start getting paid. So that's a financing challenge that all robotics as a company services face, robotics service companies face. We still face that challenge. It's it ends up being a financing challenge just as much as it is a scale-up challenge in other ways.
Yes, if I could follow up on that financing challenge. So it sounds like you have dozens, if not hundreds, of robots out in the field. But if you look back to maybe when you had a handful, and then for someone like us, we have a pilot with a couple robots out there, and interest from Amazon and DHL for 20 to 40. But now we need to raise 2 to 5 million. But going out to the typical venture capital community, it doesn't seem that's going to work. Did you guys have some kind of specific, interesting, creative way to get financing for a robotic company that's trying to scale?
Thank you. So for us, we worked with Silicon Valley Bank, and they had a good hardware as a service, robots as a service setup. I think we were some of the first, but I would say getting debt against these, the quality of the contract is what mattered. Like, it essentially needed to be a lease where once they signed up, as long as the robot was performing, they couldn't get out of it. And so those cash flows are certain. You then have a different question, which is sort of scale. So you do need to kind of make it worth their while. And so typically that means a couple $1 million worth of debt at least. So maybe you're in that range, but I would say we had a real focus on driving with our contracts kind of, hey, there might be some technology risk. We found venture debt was fine with technology risk, but there needed to be very little risk that the customer wouldn't pay if the tech worked. And I'd say that at least worked in our scenario. Now, our customers were big waste companies, municipalities, so high credit counterparties. Different regimes, like I don't know if it's a farmer, I don't know how their credit looks, but.
Yeah, I think the contract quality matters for raising money. So the way we solve that problem is, like, they want a bunch of robots. They've signed this piece of paper that is a contract that says if you build them and deliver the service, we'll pay you this much money. And then we raised on the high number that is per customer and how big the market is. So that's a venture approach. Now, you might try to approach it by saying, look, Amazon or DHL, like, you're interested in this, can you help fund this? It doesn't even have to be equity. It could be a prepayment on the revenue that helps us finance, any kind of thing like that. But try to get creative, because that is the cycle. You have to break the chicken egg of, like, to do the revenue, I need the robots. To get the robot money, I need the revenue. You have to break the cycle somehow, and it's really just about, like, contract quality and can you get financing in any other way.
All right. Hi, I'm Dave Grant from Picnic Robotics, so a software company up in Boulder. So some similarities, some differences. One similarity I think we'd have is, Jeffrey Moore talked about adoption curves, right? One of the things we found at Picnic Robotics is if we can get to the right innovators, they buy our software very quickly. The late adopters, right, we could be pushing a rock uphill all day. So my question is really more a go-to-market question, right? Did you have a similar thing? Did you have to get to those early adopters and innovators? And if so, how did you find them, or did they find you? Any thoughts on how you take friction out of that process to make that happen smoother, faster, and lower cost?
I can speak to that. That's something we're actively working on at Scythe right now, is essentially building personas of who those early adopters are and identifying characteristics or traits, preferably quantifiably, that we can use in a scorecard to qualify customers. But leading up to this point now, I think we had 40 customers in the field this year. We are able to quickly and easily identify some of those people. Indicators like they're willing to change their routes or make operational updates to incorporate the machine. They've got the right people using the machine who aren't young tech people who like gadgets. It's more a mindset shift of innovation, willing to try new things. So we're really trying to identify and figure out who those partners are and how forward-thinking they are. A lot of it this season for us has been kind of like self-selection. The customers that said they're forward-thinking and innovative turn out not really to be. They might have innovation as a value in their business, but they don't put it into practice. And then on the other hand, we have customers that we've just excelled with this season, and we're working to figure out how to identify more of them sooner so that we can work with them in our limited deployments over the next season.
Yeah, definitely sympathize with, or I'm on the same page. If someone keeps talking about how innovative they are, it's just like, oh my God, you were talking to the wrong guy. For us, one thing we did was we were fortunate early on to get a trade article. Basically, we're the back page of like this, it was called Recycling, or Resource Recycling magazine. And the innovators read that magazine and they all started calling us up. We were very fortunate to get that article. But that might be recycling specific, that people actually read the trade mags, so I don't know.
Landscapes too.
Landscape, yeah.
Coming to an end, I think we're over time, unfortunately. I wanted to thank you all because all of you moved to Colorado, also Jack, to start their companies here, and I think that's really awesome. Who would have thought 15 years ago how far we would get as a community? And maybe we can give a round of applause to the panel and then mingle in the reception. Thank you.